And if that one is not the direct work of an imperialist who is interested in failing development on the Ugandan soil, what else is it?
You have got your aid in your own country, a Frenchman in France who is drilling oil in his own country and in other African countries is giving you small tokenism and
which he steals from you. They steal from West Africa.
Come and go and demonstrate. Go and demonstrate in your country so that your country can stop drilling its own oil to look after you.
That is quite clear. Same for Total, same for EACOP. Now going back to those activists, because you guys obviously know that I know them personally, those activists that of course, really, I haven't studied with some of them. I've studied with some of them. I know the story really from as an insider point of view.
You studied
from Paris.
From Paris?
Yeah.
France?
So at the time where I was studying...
Let's go slow. Some of the demonstrators on Kampala streets over EACOP, they sponsored them in France.
They were actually demonstrating from Paris.
So is the
yes, but there are some here in Kampala streets here. They were even going to Parliament.
Yes,
so he's
so we can have a special.
Wait. He's telling something. Comrade Rugarama, these are some of the black-skinned Ugandans, but who got everything education from France, and now after they have got to come here and do a mission on behalf of France.
But that is the biggest problem. That's the biggest problem we're talking about.
When they are speaking, when they're presenting themselves, you think they are fighting for this skin.
Since the younger age, I think it's Thomas Sankara that taught me that no country will come to develop an African country. Never ever. Like, people come to develop themselves. Qatar comes to develop itself. Russia comes to develop itself. France came at colonial time to develop themselves. And yes, they have the tools and they have the infrastructure of neocolonialism. And if we think that they will sign them out, we blind. They will always continue to keep them. They will always continue to keep them. And the fragmentation that they have done towards those years of colonialism is really huge. If I pass 150 years here in the middle of both of you, telling you that he's not your brother, he's not your brother, or you know what he told me? He told me he liked your wife, or you know what he told me? He told me like he don't like your daughter, or things like this, for 150 years. Then I leave you alone. I'm gonna say it's not me responsible for you guys' division, but it is.
The Pan-African Pyramid Weekly Round Table. Andrew Lumba Paksabi, Speaker, Comrade Thomas-Lesaffre, Senior Veteran Journalist and Researcher, and my comrade Danny Rugarama. Danny Rugarama, the other third name of you is called what? Danny Rugarama, there is that family name.
Karuchiko.
Those are the names they want. Danny Rugarama, Karuchiko. You repeat Karuchiko. Karuchiko, he didn't say Karuchiko. Karuchiko.
Kwa, is it ko or kwa? Ko, Karuchiko.
Yeah, he didn't say kwa.
It doesn't sound like a manla. Karuchiko. What does it mean? Does it have a meaning? Does it have a meaning or?
Karuchiko.
Oh, yes.
There is no African name without a meaning.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah. There is somebody in the football club called the rice. Another one called the water.
And for your own satisfaction, Chiko is a meeting. A meeting in the African traditional society usually to be held on a Monday.
Okay.
So is
the Monday meeting. It means Monday meeting.
This one.
That's good. That's very clever. That's very good.
You have many names that have no meaning in your content there.
I think we lost the meaning. So it seems like.
What does Lesaffre mean?
So it was someone that used to eat way too much.
Lesaffre.
So le means the, and Saffre means like someone that have eat so much that he has a big belly. It's like so Saffre, the guy that eat too much. So probably my ancestor back in the day in the village was the guy that finished all the plates. So he got named after that.
It's a sharp
and my mom is. The genes have lost. The genes have been lost. But my mom is more interesting. My mom's name means from the bar. So the name means you coming from the bar.
What's the name?
Del Bar. The name is Del Bar, and it means you're coming from the bar. So like
the drinking place, the bar.
The drinking place, yeah. it means you're coming from the place where you drink, Del Bar, in my province.
So that's where she came from.
So that's my mom's name. My dad's name is about the food. So I also know but I don't know because my parents also, my uncles, they are more than you than they look like me. So me, I'm a special brain.
Uganda has taken a significant step towards boosting its oil and energy sector following the signing of a historic agreement with Alpha MBM Investments International, a United Arab Emirates-based company, for the construction of a crude oil refinery in Hoima district. President Museveni, very happy, who presided over the signing, expressed his gratitude to His Highness Sheikh Mohammed bin Maktoum and UAE investors for their dedication to investing in Uganda's economic future. I want to thank you, that is President Museveni saying, I want to thank you, His Highness Sheikh Mohammed bin Maktoum and our friends from the UAE for their commitment to investing in Uganda. He stated, the new oil refinery with a capacity of 60,000 barrels per day is expected to revolutionize Uganda's oil industry by shifting the country from an importer of refined petroleum products to a producer and exporter. Museveni emphasized that Uganda must move away from exporting raw materials and instead prioritize value addition. That's number one. Number two, we are thinking as Pan-Africans that there is actually an attempt. There is an attempt to recolonize Africa, and they are passing through such avenues, investments, especially now the United States Emirates have become a sub-imperial power in Africa. It is investing in ports, airports and infrastructure projects to extract resources and increase its global political and military influence. Understanding the UAE's role in reshaping regional geopolitics is critical for resistance and justice movement to challenge imperialist power struggles effectively. Comrade Rugarama, should I begin with this Lesaffre?
I think we can.
Begin with Lesaffre.
Maybe too.
Our leaders in Africa are welcoming with open arms. I'm just using UAE as an example, but the debate is broader. These investors from the other continents, from Africa. However, when they are coming to your continent, they're showing you the good things they're coming to do for you. But they have a primary mission, colonization, because they come with some small tokenism. As you allow them to go to Hoima to construct the oil refinery, in a way they are also encroaching on your resources, actually taking much of your wealth, even human capital. So we tend to think at what they are bringing without thinking at what they are taking. Yeah, I want you to take it from
It is quite clear that since the 90s, Africa has jumped inside one boat, right? It's the boat of neoliberalism, right? So it's the boat that was delivered by the IMF, right? So the policies are quite clear. The economic policy are quite clear. And the result is what? The result of those policies is that we need direct investment from overseas, right? So in order to develop countries now, you need to attract foreign investors. That was not the same in the 50s, in the 60s, in the 70s, but that's the time we are in, right? So in this situation where there is 53 countries having to seek for foreign investors, obviously there is some sort of competition, right? So we think more of what we can offer than what they can offer, right? However, it is clear that the world power are shifting and that for every single power to establish himself, he needs to have an African strategy. Without African strategy, there would have been no USSR. Without an African strategy, it would have been no French imperialism. Without an African strategy, it would have been probably no US. So they always come with a solid African strategy. And I think it's important that we look at it and we realize that we know how imperialism function, we know how colonialism function, we know what our neocolonialism function, and we should be able to also have a look at how it is happening today, because there is huge sum of money that are being spread around to develop, or so-called to develop, or to create partnerships. But obviously, we're speaking of a really unfair or unequal partnership. The UAE have a lot of money. They have a lot of financial resources. They've been exporting petrol in a huge number since the late 90s. So they do have like the capacity to also push their own agenda without us seeing it. So I want to reiterate that. First point is the economic conditions are here for Africa to be recolonized. That's the point. The point is because we're seeking for direct foreign investment, we need to really look at what they're bringing. And there is a potential for recolonization if we are not careful about looking at them. Turkey, Qatar, Emirates, Russia, of course China, the US and the Europe and French and Britain were here before, but those are newcomers, right? And we want to look at those newcomers and what they do. Just in 2022, right? There have been 20 to 50 billions of dollars invested by UAE simply in Africa, right? They have invested into buying land in Liberia. They have investing into buying back the infrastructure that colonial capitalism have left, right? So if we're speaking especially about harbors, they have Mombasa, they have Dakar, they have Abidjan. They have all those harbors, they have more and more harbors because they want to establish themselves as the trading point of Africa. And it's no surprise that Dubai right now is the place in the world where you would find the most African gold. They are really trying to be that trading hub to direct Africans' minerals and resources all around the world. So when the petrol is finished, they have these things. So they open harbors, they open trade roads, and those trade roads dig and seek the value of African minerals out of the continent, it seems to me. So I just wanted to maybe open the introduction like this. I think we can pass the conversation to my colleague here, and I think we can discuss the different powers, what maybe Turkey, Qatar, Emirati.
Comrade Lugarama, the new emerging colonial powers on the African continent. Let's begin from there, my brother.
Thank you so much, Comrade Rumba, and a very good morning to our esteemed viewers. When you look at senior comrade and global strategic commentators and researchers, such as Professor Naomi Chomsky, that Jewish American professor, he points out that the United States of America is a declining power. And I do agree with him. But at the same time, a declining power does not necessarily mean that it is not a conquering power. Because we know that in declining, some empires, an empire which is declining, has got capacity to conquer some of the lesser or insignificant, if you like, territories. And in the case of United States of America and her cousins like France and Europe, they have got now advised way of practicing colonialism, which is manifested in imperialism and neo-colonialism. And that their vehicle is the International Monetary Fund, we call IMF, and the World Bank, which is all together the Bretton Woods institutions. Now, Professor and our senior comrade in the Pan-African ranks, Piero Lumumba, has told us several times, whenever we care to listen, that Africa is weak. And he does not say it in bad faith, because he is, in my estimation, a true Pan-Africanist, and he says it with a heavy heart. He says we are weak because we are unable to exploit our own natural resources. We are weak because we are unable to come together and defend our territory. We are weak because we are unable to advance technologically. We are weak because when we are talking about the 4G, 5G, artificial intelligence technologies, we are busy sleeping in churches and calling upon God. We are weak because at the end of the day, things which are scientific and must be solved by ideological revolution and science can never be solved in the arena of philosophy and also divinity, or if you like, eschatology. Now, having said that, Africa, generally speaking, seems to be experiencing new colonial masters. Of course, when you dig deeper, they may as well not qualify to be new colonial masters, in the sense that when you look at the investment now, that China arguably is the biggest investor on the African continent. And they pride in what we call soft power. Now, this is not what France is. Although France had what we used to call assimilation as their policy, where they would make you feel that you are also a Frenchman, they certainly had at the back of their mind, especially in their colonial territories, what we used to call French West Africa. They would make those French West Africa people feel as if they were part and parcel of France. But when in actual sense, we knew that theirs was not any better from what the English were doing, although the English were not necessarily practicing assimilation. Now, we have got new emerging powers who we are yet to discover as to whether they are not appendages and extensions of the old colonial powers. Because when you look, for instance, and not just on the African continent, when you look at cases like in Syria, you realize that the heavy hand of Turkey, or Turkey, if you like, as they wish to call themselves, is very apparent. But who knows if Turkey, for instance, is not part and parcel an extension of the United States of America? You see, that is the argument we are having. The new leadership now we have in Turkey, for instance, is in Syria rather, is attributed to the activities of the Turkish government. But you may find at the end of the day that that may not be so. We have got situations where, for instance, the entire Middle East, when you look at the so-called ring of enemies against the literal Israel, they are now going to establish the missile shield is in Jordan, meaning that America does not have to come and protect Israel from Israel's territory, but the neighboring territories, if they can create friendship, if you like, or if they can buy out the leadership in Jordan, such that Jordan allows the erecting of missile shield against, say, Iran, then that will work. And that is now how the colonialism or neo-colonialism, if you like, that is how it is being practiced. The situation whereby if they want now to control part of West Africa effectively, where the Kwame Nkrumah's territory, Ghana, never used to have any American military base. They are now having, during the time of Barack Obama, they are having a military base in Ghana. There are so many playing powers in Djibouti, which my brother Rotatina here was talking about. You will find that in Djibouti alone, that small enclave has got more than 8 powers with military bases. You ask yourself, why should, for instance, United Arab Emirates, France, United States of America, Russia, why should all those countries have their military bases in a country called Djibouti? No wonder that when we were having elections, for instance, at the African Union, and this is a point that majority of our comrades don't bring out, there were so many vested interests in the affairs of African Union that a candidate from Djibouti had to win. Forget that our brother Baba Rally Odinga was ordered and so many other reasons. But I can assure you that the interest that all those powers had in Djibouti had got to be translated in the African Union. No wonder that when you have got somebody with such high Pan-African credentials in Comrade Odinga, it is not good for the interested parties, the Eurocentric interested parties or conceptual Europe, the interests in the affairs of Africa. So at the end of the day, you will find that countries like United Arab Emirates increased investment on the African continent, investment in the acquisition and maintenance of harbors, seaports, could be as a consequence of either agency or they are directly also buying. But chances that, for instance, they are extensions, appendages of the greater America, United States of America, Britain, France, cannot be wished away. But the fact that at the same time, we have got other emerging powers, like which were hitherto not showing a lot of direct interest on the African continent, like Russia. Russia, we know now that wherever France is losing ground, Russia either is quietly influencing the France losing ground and it takes over, or it is China which is indirectly or directly influencing Britain, America, losing ground and they take over. Africa seems to be courting new suitors that this time around we have tested for over 60 years plus the participation of the well-known colonial powers that Africa has known. Britain, Africa, the former so-called Great Britain, Africa has known France, and in a manner of speaking, although America, United States of America was not a colonizing power, but since the Second World War, it certainly became a superpower, and through her macroeconomic policies, as witnessed in the World Bank and International Monetary Fund, they have in a way been colonizing Africa and other places in Eastern Europe, in Western Europe to some extent, because the so-called cooperation between Western Europe and America in NATO is, in my opinion, really a form of neo-colonialism. So in a manner of speaking, Western Europe also has been, in one way or another, colonized by United States of America. But they seem to decently call it partnership. When you look at the now renewed interests of United States of America in Greenland, and we're knowing that Greenland and Denmark, for instance, have been together for well over 800 years, if I'm not mistaken. But now United States of America, you can call it arrogance, whatever you choose, is now saying we need to take over the leadership in Greenland. So at the end of the day, you can see who is bossing who. That the Western Europe that was bossing Africa is now getting bossed also. But at the same time, we also have a situation where the hitherto known colonial powers, the British as a colonial power on the African continent, French with the French West Africa, Spain, Portugal, all those powers now, their influence has been declining not just on the African continent, but also in parts of Asia, where China is taking over. Because like I earlier on mentioned, by the way, that China is the biggest investor on the African continent. The last Sino-China conference indicated China having overtaken America by far as direct investment on the African continent is concerned. In a manner of speaking, therefore, yes, we have new colonial powers on the African continent, in China, in Russia, and if you like, in the parts of the Middle East, coming onto the African continent, but also going in Eastern Europe, some parts of Eastern Europe, the influence of Russia now, because arguably, by the way, you will find that if Russia is now determining what is going to happen in Ukraine, like it or not, and I think we have had enough discussion about this with Comrade Dortatina here, that what is going to happen in the next 1-2 years and beyond in Ukraine will be on the dictates of Russia. And at the same time, what is going to happen in the Eastern Europe?
Russia was telling America and the United Nations that if you want this problem solved, please, can you put a tentative leadership and you remove this man Zelensky? Because first of all, he has overstressed his term. But secondly, he cannot handle what is going through.
At the end of the day, I want to agree with you, Mr. Speaker, sir. Just straight on that, straight comment on that, that the affairs of Ukraine are not determined in Ukraine. Worst case scenario, the affairs of Ukraine are even not determined in Europe. The affairs of Ukraine are determined between White House and Russia. And that is the truth. Having said that, as a way of concluding on the new emerging colonial powers on the African continent, it is without doubt that whoever is going to conquer Africa, if it must be conquered, if we do not get organized, is going to go through soft power. The policies of America and the conceptual and the Western Europe have been tested for more than 60 years, and they were through slave trade, colonialism, and now imperialism. But the soft power in China, that China is exposing Africa to, the soft power in Russia, whether you want to call their forces mercenary or whatever, they will come without bossing around and at the same time use their companies, so-called private companies, to act like they are doing in Sudan. I want also to state and be on record that what sparked the mayhem in Sudan was nothing but a fight over who controls the port. The American forces warned the sitting leadership in Khartoum. I said, don't sign that agreement. Forget al-Bashir was already incarcerated. So they don't sign that contract with China or Russia. It was like a combination. As far as
Russia has interest in South Sudan.
Yes, as far as the port is concerned, and the leadership in Khartoum went ahead and signed that contract. The American forces, whether you want to say United Arab Emirates or Egypt, is supporting whichever side it is supporting, those are proxies. It's like we are seeing the intensification of the so-called revolts in Ethiopia. It is all because of the independent-mindedness of Ethiopian Prime Minister wanting to create for instance, the Grand Renaissance Dam, which is being seen, and you can imagine, countries like Egypt are coming up geostrategically to claim that they have got big ownership rights over the waters of the Nile, simply because when the British were departing, they left them with an agreement. Now, you have Sudan, also Khartoum, claiming bigger rights over the waters of the Nile more than Uganda, which is the source of the Nile. Now, all due to stupid colonial agreements signed by somebody who didn't have authority, because Britain did not have authority over the waters of the Nile. So at the end of the day, why do we have destabilization in Ethiopia? Simply because Ethiopia has given contracts to China and using her own engineers and North America or American cousins to do the great Grand Renaissance Dam, which will be providing higher energy in Ethiopia and also able to sell to the neighboring countries that energy, which is one of the ingredients of industrial revolution, which these colonial powers, neo-colonial powers don't want, and they seem to be pretending about it. They would rather want you to keep under the armpits of their macroeconomic policies of IMF and World Bank are giving you the so-called loans which are obtained at higher interest rates of well over 8%, when some countries which are actually direct beneficiaries, because if Africa was to be a beneficiary of IMF and World Bank, then I think we would have gotten out of the quagmire in which we are a long time ago, because we have been getting those loans since we so-called got the independence, the so-called independence, which they claim that we get.
No, it's really important what you just said, because this last week in Senegal, the Prime Minister Sonko has announced that the previous regime have had an IMF hidden debt, right? And what does it mean? It means that Senegal owns 7 billion more to the IMF than what it was declared by the previous government. So concretely, it is really significant. Please follow, because it's really important. What is happening is that IMF was helping Macky Sall regime to give them loans to develop the country, knowing that they are going to lose power. So they were doing hiding debt. So they used to hide the debt. The IMF used to, on purpose, hide the debt of Senegal. So when the next regime, which we knew already was patriotic Senegalese, found the debt, they realized that now the debt is outside, so we know that Senegal owns 7 billion more, and what it means concretely is that Senegal cannot go on global market and borrow money at the same rate than Macky Sall used to. So to make it simple, maybe like the new regime wants $10 billion, it's going to cost him $1 billion to reimburse that debt. When for the previous regime, the very same $10 billion would be reimbursed like $200,000, right? So the capacity to borrow for Senegalese patriotic government currently are lower than under the neo-colonial Macky Sall regime. So they play, those loans are tools to make sure that regime change happen towards like the way they want. And they used to call transparency. But now we are realizing that they are not transparent in how they deal with government, and especially with the government they like. When they don't like the Frelimo in Mozambique, they expose them. But when they like Macky Sall in Senegal, they don't expose reality, right? It was the end of colonization. People knew that it was the end of Second World War was the end of colonialism for European powers, and they were trying to recycle themselves as neo-colonial power, right? And they've done it at the same time where they developed those institutions. So I know it's a bit complex, like those are like macroeconomics, check on it, but it's quite simple to realize that when a patriotic government raised in Africa, they also play with those interest rates, and they also play with those loans and debt. So the government cannot borrow money at a satisfying rate, and so therefore it cannot like deliver the promise to its population.
Mr. Speaker, I can give you information. I'm very grateful for this contribution that has come from my brother Rotati Nahia. Very, very powerful. The further to what he has just submitted on, I will tell you that if you want to get some of these hard-hitting facts about the pretense of countries like the Western Europe and America, then you have to read a book like the Conspiracy of the Economic Hitman. Now, when you look at the Conspiracy of Economic Hitman by Parkinson, you realize that what the United States of America does through CIA is to make sure that they give countries the so-called loans. They go through the World Bank, they go through the International Monetary Fund, and they make sure that they make you go into ventures which are worthless.
Yeah.
They are not going to go with the National Planning Authority.
Yeah.
What the country desires is not what the so-called advisors. You realize that in every country there is the so-called World Bank advisor. That World Bank advisor's role
But we call
is
him World Bank
nothing.
misadvisor.
So
He's not just a misadvisor.
Ouattara used to do that before he became president.
Yes.
Yeah,
Those-
they made him president after.
Those are just extensions. What they do is that they bring such a representative in your country to check on whether you are kowtowing or you are not falling in the line. And when you are not falling in the line, then a report will be authored, and so many reports have been authored to make sure that they use other means to fail you as a leadership. During the time of His Excellency Pombe Magufuli, Doctor, may his soul rest in eternal peace, he saw through some of these things. And he said to her, I'm not going to take any loans from the World Bank. He actually even refused the loans from the so-called friends like China. He said we can do these things ourselves through taxes, but at the same time, you see, prudence. There are certain things. And when Pan-Africanism or Pan-Africanists we say some of these things, they say we are externalizing the problem. That every problem we get on the African continent, we seem to think and want actually to put it on the external forces. No, we are alive and aware of the fact that there are certain things which we should be doing ourselves as Africans. But in one way or another, we have failed our people, we have failed ourselves. We have got bad leaders. Much as there are bad leaders elsewhere on the European continent, Asia, in America, but they also exist on the African continent. That aside, the African continent is in double jeopardy. We have got such, yes, weak, ideologically bankrupt leaders, some, not all of them, but at the same time we have got the persistent, invisible hand of a colonial master who turned himself into a capitalist, removed himself away from us physically, and is remote controlling us through those institutions that I have talked about. He is everywhere controlling things we don't see, and all we do now is to train the likes of graduates from Harvard, graduates from Oxford, Yale University. They come with high-sounding degrees, which we call and all they do is to argue. And when they argue, we have a tendency, because we are elites, to believe them. And in this belief, we say, if it has been said by a graduate from Harvard, a graduate from, it must be the correct thing. When in actual sense, their training is to ensure that they come and take over the institutions of government in World Bank, in ministries, influential ministries, in planning authority, to redirect and put the policies of Africa governments in line with those ones of IMF and the World Bank, and you will never see any organic development. Kwame Nkrumah was right, I agree with him, when he said that as long as we do not develop our own policies and be able to finance them like Pombe Magufuli was doing, we shall only sing about independence of Africa, and we are not going to be any better than we were before the so-called flag independence. I want to conclude on this, Mr. Speaker, sir, by observing the following. That I fear that what we are experiencing on the African continent in neocolonialism is even worse than what we were saying during colonial time. Correct. 1. 2, I fear that the new contenders on the African continent, whom we seem to be calling the new emerging colonial powers, are actually appendages, extensions of the old colonial powers. I fear that in the new love we are finding in some of these powers, like Russia, like China, if we do not employ the new advanced Pan-African tactics of handling these new friends, we are going to suffer worse than we suffered during the colonial days. I so submit, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you very much, Comrade Comrade Lesaffre.
No, just going back on the last point, it is quite clear. Personally, I've called it the third era of colonialism. The first era was slavery, second era was colonialism, and now we're in the third one, which is neoliberalism, right? Yeah, maybe it goes on the mic. When we think of these notions, we can say that we can look at numbers, and I've crushed the numbers. The Chinese have exported more minerals out of DRC, out of Congo, than all Belgium colonialism, right? So the capacity for global powers to exploit African resources are quite huge right now. The willingness is always going to be here. The willingness is always going to be here. Since Mansa Musa, they're trying to steal the gold of Africa. So the willingness will always be here. The question is also about the capacity. And they have much more capacity than before. Primarily because they do a lot of things by machines, and so those machines have more capacity to extract the minerals of Africa that the previous one had, right? Second thing also because they don't need to pass by any African infrastructure to export those minerals. We're seeing with the gold. No one sees how the gold is exported from this continent, but we all know it ends up in Dubai. But no one really can pinpoint where it is that is coming out, because it's really easy. So we are in the third era of colonialism, that is for sure, and it's an efficient era. It's a really efficient one. Now the question is, I want to also bring back an interesting point to the pictures, which is that when the second era of colonialism started, it was the first era and the second era, which was slavery and colonialism. It started because of competitions in those world power, right? So world power were not anymore sitting on confidently growing. They knew that they can't grow any further because their neighbors were also growing. So they knew it would bring some drama, right? And I think that's what I'm also seeing right now in the Gulf. When you look at the politics of the Gulf, you have Arabia Saudi, you have Oman, you have Yemen, and you have Qatar and the Emiratis, right? Basically, and Iran on the other side. All of those countries hate each other right now. Emiratis are trying to overtake Qatar. Qatar is fighting with Saudi Arabia, even though now it's a bit better, but there is a lot of tensions between those countries. Oman claimed that Emirati is part of his country. As a matter of fact, Emirates is part of Oman, and it's the British that took Emirates outside of Oman in 1971. Oman was always have been Dubai, Doha, El Sawar, all those cities always have been part of Oman in the history, and we know that Oman was a really influential power.
Britain had to come and help
Britain. So what happened is that
1971.
so with the help, because Omani had set up in East Africa, Oman, the country Oman, they have set up in East Africa in 18th, 19th century. They got to drive so much resources outside of East Africa that they become the second biggest maritime power in the Indian Oceans. So the British fear it, and what they did is they used their gun to control the peninsula, and they divided it, divide and rule, the classic, right? They told the Sultan, the peninsula of Oman, they told the Sultan that his brother should be Sultan of the north and he should be Sultan of the south. They come to divide and rule. And in 1971, so 150 years after, it was a protectorate, not a colony, 150 years later, they give independence, they granted independence to Emirates.
Who is giving?
The British power. The British.
Giving us who?
So they
You can ask that again. Probably, maybe I should remind you. No, but be reminded also that this is not the first time the English are doing such a thing or have done such a thing.
Of the blue.
When they were leaving Palestine, they handed it over to the Jews. The Jews, if you like.
The Zionists.
And now you call them the Zionists.
Yeah.
I agree. So, and now we have got the so-called independent state of Israel. But we know that the English were the ones who were colonizing that part of the world, and they were colonizing it. There were people there already, and when they were departing, they went and invited the Jews who were scattered all over the world, and majority of them who were coming from America. Together, the English and the United States of America created the current now state of Israel in the Middle East, and we know why. Therefore, is that an indigenous country, state there, or it is an extension and a satellite state of America? When America breathes, Israel catches a cold, and when it catches a cold, it coughs into the entire Middle East. The bullying tactics that Israel uses in the entire Middle East is not because they're such a superpower, but because they know they have got a bigger brother who is going to extend her tentacles and cause havoc. Yeah. But now, watch the space, because a country like Iran has indeed developed nuclear capabilities, and that is why now Israel is conscious when it is hitting back, and it is no longer doing the bullying it was doing before. That's why I'm saying, therefore, with the so-called new emerging powers on the African continent, the colonial powers, if you like, who certainly are not going to do the physical occupation of the different African countries, but they go through neo-colonialism tactics and extend their tentacles in your agriculture, in your finance, in your trade. They are everywhere in your trade. And that's why some of us who have been arguing that, you see, we have got a problem. Umeme gave us a raw deal. I liked Andrew Mwenda's argument about Umeme. Bring the historical context. Of course, it is unfortunate that again we found ourselves in the situation in which we found ourselves. Remember, around that time, NRM as a leadership. Because that brings me back to what I have been telling you, that we also have a fair share of our blame as leaders. I expected the NRM, my government, my president, Yoweri Kaguta Museveni, to have done better on Umeme. How is it so possible that people around that time could have such a vital utility, like power distribution to a people so mismanaged that we are now begging somebody out there to come and put right
on our behalf?
Because whatever we were doing, we were not in any position to negotiate better than we negotiated at that time. Because we were simply being helped out.
We were at the weaker end.
And the moment you are the weaker party in any engagement, you cannot expect, it will take a miracle for you to get any better deal than what the other party is proposing for you. In a nutshell, therefore, what we are witnessing on the African continent, the emergence of Russia, the emergence of China, taking over in trade, because what we are missing here really is technology, better trade terms, because what we have been relying on is encouragement, invitation, or if some actually invite themselves, of non-governmental organizations. We are creating a very lethargic society whereby the non-governmental organizations were coming and donating. We are having creating a community on the African continent where non-governmental organizations would go deep down in the villages, donate boreholes, clean water, extend medicines, create the so-called civic spaces, to tell people empower people civically, and the society we were therefore creating was a society that was not organic, was not African. It was a society created by neo-colonial powers, which was in the hands of the neo-colonialists, whose thinking, way of doing things was nothing but also Eurocentric way of looking at issues, and there is no way an African society can be able to get out of its quagmire, to solve her own problems, when the thinking, the analysis tools used are but those of the controlling colonial master.
No, correct. I mean, it is quite clear that all the time that we're speaking of those deals that you speak about, those loans and all of this, they need to be reimbursed in dollars. Just simply, it's quite simple. Like, so if Senegal or Uganda decide to make a trade, get a loans from IMF and make trades with China, and then now he has to ask China, oh China, can you pay us in dollars so now we can reimburse the IMF? So he put the power of the dollars, the economic power at the center of all those exchange, even if he has no claim. He has no claim for it. But yeah, as Pan-African, we look at history and we look at what have been shaping those powers. And when we see a state coming out of the blue, outside of British imperialism, that is the very first state that signed the peace deal with Israel, right? Remember that peace deal with Israel? The first Arab state to sign it is the Emiratis, right? The first to break the Arab argument or the Arab unity on the Palestinian questions. The first one to break it was those guys, right? And so those emerging powers will always have an interest into seeking African resources and seeking like the benefits of those resources in order to grow. They always have grown like this. They always, so it comes with no surprise. The question is, as my colleagues have put it here, my comrade, how do we prepare ourselves for such a situation? How do we become self-reliant like Menga Fuli was pushing? How do we make sure that when we can take loans, we negotiate that we can reimburse the loans with our own money, or with Chinese money, or with Russian money, but not only with dollars, with a set of different money, maybe Naira, maybe Rands, a set of different money that will push African trade to be inside the continent. I want to also say that there is country like China that don't play the politics. And those new countries, especially from the Middle East, they do play a lot of politics. They play more politics than China does. They play politics like France and Britain used to do, right? In the case of the Emirati, yes, they're opening a refinery here in Uganda, or at least they claim they're opening a refinery. But in the very same time, they also open a new international airport in Karamoja, which means what? It's going to be a dark hole. There will be a dark hole in the middle of Karamoja, and whatever is exported and imported from that side, we won't know about it, right? So if they want to
on your point, Reshafri, your point, let me just give you this information that actually the reason as to why we have not had a refinery and as to why we have had so many contracts broken is because the Eurocentric thinkers and European funders and American funders have always not wanted real development on the African continent. In the sense that, for instance, you find that Shell, the Total, all of them which are European owned, which initially had wanted to put money in the construction of a refinery in Uganda, later on withdrew unilaterally. They withdrew from the deal, knowing that it was going to collapse. When even China, that's why I was saying some of these corporations are actually extensions and agencies of the former colonial masters, also started dragging their feet. Now, that's how we now come to the so-called United Arab Emirates deal, which we signed recently. And remember that even when the president of France was actually campaigning, there was a community in France that was protesting. They were putting up wagging flags that show that you withdraw the funding from Uganda because the environmental impact assessment indicates that the Ugandans are going to suffer if the pipeline is created and the refinery is created than if they do not do it at all. Yeah. Now you imagine somebody in France is fearing for the person in Uganda, and if that one is not the direct work of an imperialist who is interested in failing development on the Ugandan soil, what else is it? You give it to me.
My brother, my senior elder, on that same one, we also need to blame ourselves. Mr. Rugarama, you have got your aid in your own country in oil. A Frenchman in France who is drilling oil in his own country and in other African countries is giving you small tokenism. And
which he steals from you. They steal from West Africa.
Go and demonstrate. Go and demonstrate in your country so that your country can stop drilling its own oil to look after you. You know, the one advising you is drilling in his own France, but also in the territories that he has over the time managed to capture from Africa. He's busy. When he's doing that, Total here is done selling to you fuel, Total from France. Now that you have your own product from Hoima, he's telling you, and he's telling, it is the Africans I saw, the young boys and girls, Ugandans, demonstrating at Parliament, demonstrating in Hoima, that EACOP must stop. No, Mr. Garam, really, a person who has Total in your country, importing fuel, where are they importing it? How have those people died along the line, the pipeline? In his own country, are they dying? But because we are so gullible, we, the Ugandans,
True.
and the Africans,
That's the word.
somebody gives you 10,000 US dollars. He tells you, go and stop, fight hard, demonstrate, stop a project of trillions worth of dollars for your own country. And then sometimes I think also that this freedom, this stupidity of freedom and the democracy. You see, America tells you that they are Democrats.
They know.
But go and do such a thing in America and see whether you will stay there.
No,
They will
absolutely.
even tell you from Guantanamo, not even in their country.
No, they have now created
Economic saboteur.
El Salvador. They have created another Guantanamo Bay in El Salvador. They are taking even the so-called Americans. You see, at the end of the day, what is surprising is that the Americans, when they get you,
This man
and
can drink African tea.
and they have tried
What was he
you,
drinking?
and they try you under the American law, then they will put you in Guantanamo Bay. They will put you now. They take you to El Salvador. Then they pay you. They pay the El Salvador leadership. If the leadership is not cooperating, then they will overthrow that one and put another one there. So what we are having now, I want to assure you.
If you allow me to finish. So, when I see those young people, I really think they are very foolish. They lack a lot of mindset. There's a problem. You cannot tell me that the pipeline, where it is passing, those people are going to die. And so France mind so much about these people than us.
But we have got a report. We have a report which says the impact assessment report is very clear that we are safe. The reason as to why those who are demonstrating,
even if we are not safe, comrade, does France, the French people, care so much about those unsafe people along with that people than ourselves?
they stopped the creation of a currency in French West Africa, where Nigeria wanted to join. Do you know why they did that? They did it because they knew if Nigeria joins in creating the eco currency, they were going to dilute the currency that France actually owns. Every dime that is saved of the hard saved money in the French West Africa is banked in Paris, the central bank of Paris. And you remember, like our sister, Dr. Chohombori Arkana says, if those countries want to borrow, they again have got to write to the French government asking
their own money.
that we should borrow, and it is the French government to determine to give them what belongs to them, to give it to them. Remember, they have already utilized it. Now, those circumstances,
borrowing.
Yes,
My money to come to pick it from you, now you are borrowing me. My money.
you are calling it your money.
I have kept my money with the bank. Now I have said I need my money. No, you put that you are borrowing. Change the language. It's not your money, you are borrowing.
In the first place, when you are putting it there, was it under your terms? The very fact that you are putting it there not under your terms, the very fact that you are still operating under what we call Pact for Continuation of Colonialism. Pact for continuation of colonialism. Only 2 countries in West Africa didn't sign it. The rest of the countries in West Africa that were controlled and ruled by the French government during colonial time signed Pact for Continuation of Colonialism. What does it mean?
Which countries did not?
Guinea.
It was Guinea and
The second one, I'm not sure.
the second one also there. 2 countries which didn't sign. And when they didn't sign, you saw what happened. Actually, those two countries, their infrastructure, which was also built by the French, was completely dismantled. I think Mali also. It was Mali and Gone. So I wanted to conclude on that. What happens? Those young men you are talking about, the young men and young women who were demonstrating, who will go to the embassies, Ugandan embassy or African embassies, and demonstrate the way they want to demonstrate, thinking that the solution is going to come from those countries. They are suffering what we call mind problem. The mindset, the mind is not theirs. The mind has been captured, and they don't want to know that the mind has been captured. That is why it is the challenge now for us, the Pan-Africanists. It is our biggest challenge and our duty to make sure that we evangelize and convert those people to bring them back to the real correct thinking, which is Pan-African thinking.
Go right ahead, my comrade.
There's a lot to say about this one. Unfortunately, there were only one country that refused the French neo-colonial pact. It was Guinea under Sékou Touré, and later on Modibo Keïta withdrew from it. But at the moment of independence, Mali and Senegal.
That was
the Mali,
exactly.
The Mali. But when they signed for independence, they signed the agreement. They voted yes at that referendum that was brought, and they said no. The men that said no, he said we prefer to be slave but free than enslaved and not free, right? The quote is can be translated differently in English. He said it in French. Nous préférons la liberté dans la pauvreté à la richesse dans l'esclavage. Fantastic. That's what I translated. Yeah. We prefer to be free in poverty than to be enslaved and to be enslaved and be rich. So Sékou Touré, right? But I think also in what you've been saying it is quite clear that once again, like, it's history, right? History tells us those are the problem. The problem is that the continent has a lot of states that were designed as being gatekeepers for overseas power, right? So the African state have been designed per design as to make sure like it has gatekeepers. It's a gatekeeper state in order to extract the resources of the continent. That's what it was designed for, and that way it was passed to the first national bourgeoisie that set the contract. So by design, it is really easy to impoverish a population. By design, it is really easy to make entire population being dependent of their leadership, because the leadership is the only one controlling the relationship with the rest of the world, right? When it comes to Total, I like, it was quite clear for me since the younger age. I think it's Thomas Sankara that taught me that no country will come to develop an African country. Never ever. Like, people come to develop themselves. Qatar comes to develop itself. Russia comes to develop itself. France came at colonial time to develop themselves. And yes, they have the tools and they have the infrastructure of neocolonialism. And if we think that they will sign them out, we blind. They will always continue to keep them. They will always continue to keep them. And the fragmentation that they have done towards those years of colonialism is really huge. If I pass 150 years here in the middle of both of you, telling you that he's not your brother, he's not your brother, or you know what he told me? He told me he like your wife, or you know what he told me? He told me like he don't like your daughter, or things like this, for 150 years. Then I leave you alone. I'm gonna say it's not me responsible for you guys' division, but it is. It is, and the conflict in West Africa with the Tuaregs is literally related to that. The conflict in the east of Congo is related to that. The conflict in Sudan is related to that. It is always the same situation. They have divided and they have put per design the infrastructure that keep that division. So the rest of the world, the outside of Africa is powerful. And once again they do it using dollars. But yes, whatever it is Qatar, whatever it's China, whatever it's Russia, whatever it's France, back in the day, today, they will not come to develop you, they come to develop themselves. That is quite clear. Same for Total, same for EACOP. Now, going back to those activists, because you guys obviously know that I know them personally, those activists that have... Of course, really, I haven't studied with some of them. I've studied with some of them. I know the story really from as an insider point of view.
You studied
from Paris.
From Paris?
Yeah,
France?
So at the time where I was studying...
Let's go slow. Some of the demonstrators on Kampala streets over EACOP, they sponsored them in France.
They were
And
actually
started with them.
demonstrating from Paris.
So is the
Yes,
demonstrative
but there are some here in Kampala streets here. They were even going to Parliament.
Yes, those
Yes, so he's
So we
telling
can have a
something.
special-
Wait. He's telling something. Comrade Rugarama, these are some of the black-skinned Ugandans, but who got everything education from France, and now after they have got to come here and do a mission on behalf of France.
But that is the biggest
Meanwhile,
block. That's the
when
biggest
they are
block we are talking about.
When they are speaking, when they're presenting themselves, you think they are fighting for this kid. They have been paid.
And that's the biggest enemy we have. An enemy who is an insider.
And that's why sometimes they hate this freedom.
But it will always be like this.
And at the time of Amin, he gets to know that these people have paid you to come here and you will not go back home. Problem dealt with for once and for all. Because you're stupid.
The international community now is present.
And now, these French people will be the same one to first come bring here. What is the TV, the biggest TV in France?
TF1.
They will be here, France International. They have killed so much people. How many people are you killing? Why are you not reporting about them?
No, you ask about Assange. You remember when Assange reported what was happening in Afghanistan? And remember during the American politics, the Trump and Clinton? You remember when they said that the problem actually Trump was now saying that you look at what is happening to Assange. But when he became the president, Trump first, you know what happened? He was the one who was promoted the extradition of Assange.
Yes.
You see, what was the prime of Assange? Simple reporting.
What was happening in America?
What is the so-called freedom of speech and expression in America? Do you see that blasphemy?
Yes. So now, these people, if these Ugandans did that in America, they would charge you with first of all, terrorism. Then there is this economic support.
they ever like.
You will not return. But here, somebody comes, there are things that we should not.
They will charge you for corruption. They will charge you for corruption. So as soon as you expose the system, they will come and charge you for corruption.
Corruption is a small.
No, but like that's the way they do it because they are the corruption masters. So if you corrupt without their own corruption, they don't like it. It's what's happening with the dollars. When you and I transact in dollars, right now you give me let's say $50 for this TV show. Like this transaction is under American law. Just because we have used dollars between you and me, even if we're not in the US, even if it has nothing to do with the US, it is under US law.
Because we use their currency.
Because we use their currency, and they have that law that says whenever our currency is used, it is accountable to the judiciary system. And when you know the judiciary system and how it functions, you know it is a tool to discipline commerce and trade. So I think that is also what you were speaking about in when you quote that book earlier. Maybe just to conclude.
I disturbed you when you're bringing your point on these
activists.
The ones you started with. Maybe you can continue.
No, when it comes to them and what they're doing, what they believe in, I'm really well aware of how they function. I'm really well aware of who is who. And I'm really well aware of the type of threat they receive from the state and the mindset also, the original mindset. I think if we want to do a show just about this topic, it would be a really great show because I think it's a huge topic. It's a huge topic.
Let's do that next month.
Absolutely.
We can invite them. We can have them here if you want.
Friday. We continue with it on Friday or we do Monday?
No, Friday. Yeah.
Because I will tell you, this is what is very interesting also. Maybe before I forget. In the so-called emerging powers, even on the African continent, by the way, we have got the so-called emerging colonialists. Because we have got cases of Morocco. Morocco itself, when you look at our brothers, the Moroccans, because they want to, they are the Republic of Sahara.
Don't even bring that. That's a fake news.
The Poroseria. They are the ones now who are controlling Poroseria, even when the position of African Union is that the Republic of Sahrawi is an independent country. And that's why they were jumping up and down twice applying to join the European Union, and they were rejected. When you look at the altercations between Algeria and Morocco, is because of the super colonial instincts that are manifesting in in Morocco. When you go to Morocco, in Casablanca and elsewhere, you will meet some of these characters even in markets, by the way, because they have been consciously, they have been conscientized to believe that they are not Africans, and they will be asking you, oh, so you are from Africa, how is Africa? And the same thing happened, used to happen in South Africa. Whenever you go to Durban, they also say the same thing.
Is Africa?
And when you talk about Raka Dube, they used to ask about Raka Dube, they will say, oh, Raka Dube, where is that one? Where does he come from? You are already in South Africa, you are in Durban, even in Johannesburg itself, by the way, and you meet some of these characters who are Kantankaras, and they will be asking you who Raka Dube is. When for us here, even a child in the remotest village who knows who Raka Dube is. You can see where we are headed, therefore. The youth that you are talking about, who are demonstrating about their own homegrown projects, are actually not themselves. They are black, yes, all right, but I can assure you, I am better off with a man like Rutatina here, Lesaffre, who is aware of his surroundings and has made a conscious choice and decision to support a certain position because you know you are dealing with a genuine man. We used to have such characters even in the upper side South Africa. They were whites, but they had already analyzed the situation during upper side, and they had made a conscious decision to support the cause of the black South Africans, and they had nothing. So their color had nothing to do with what was correct and what was
your
not
color has nothing to do with your conscience. The man said, go ahead, my brother.
And I prefer to deal with his conscience.
Yeah.
No, I think the topic of sub-imperialism in Africa by African so-called power like Morocco and South Africa is really interesting. It's really interesting. Even knowing that in Uganda the two major companies that pay the most tax are South African companies, right? DSTV, so MultiChoice, and MTN are paying a lot of tax in this country.
And Umeme has been paying.
And we know that under Thabo Mbeki they were sales.
UK.
Umeme is UK now.
It's
not
UK,
South Africa,
yes.
Yeah. So
already had a cooperation with the South African.
And for a long time, South Africa was the gatekeepers of Chinese investment in Africa. So South Africa will come with like retail shops such as Shoprite, Woolworths that only sell Chinese products, right? So they would be opening the African market for Chinese interest. And at that time, it was now China is more powerful in Africa, so they don't need South Africa anymore. But at the beginning, that's how they did it. So imperialism country work with sub-imperialist proxies. It's definitely a great topic. We could also put that. Just maybe as a last point, as we know, we are highlighting all those things, not to blame people, not to point people, but to raise awareness about what happened yesterday that is still happening today. And when we raise that awareness, we create the conditions for a new situation to emerge.
Mindset change is what we have.
Conscientization is what Kwame Nkrumah have asked us to do from the 50s, and this is what we're still doing in 2025.
Thank you so much, my brother Thomas Lesaffre, Rutatina, and my senior elder Dan Rugarama. The third name is, remind me again. Karukiko. And Rumba Katsabe, your speaker. This is the Pan-African Pyramid Weekly Roundup. We call it PAP Weekly Roundup. We sit here every Monday from 11 to midday at Satellite Hotel in Kisasi.
Free your mind.